Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Here's a look at our top stories tonight. Greenpeace hits out at a plan to protect the ecosystem in the waters near Kau Yi Chau. The government is complimented on adopting a tendering process, which a surveyor says is more realistic. And Hong Kong's retail sales keep climbing, but a trade group says it will take longer to reach pre-pandemic levels. The government has found stony corals in the waters near Kau Yi Chau, where it plans to build 3 artificial islands. Water channels will be constructed to protect the ecosystem, but this failed to convince a green group. Janice Low reports.
The government has set up indoor booths across the city in a bid to win public support for the controversial Kau Yi Chau Artificial Islands project. This came weeks after the authorities were accused of trying to launch a public consultation in a sneaky manner. The 3 artificial islands, covering 1,000 hectares, would provide up to 210,000 flats. Construction of the $580 billion project begins in 2025. The first residents will move in 2033, when a link connecting the islands with Hong Kong Island and Lantau is completed. To protect the stony corals discovered in the shallow waters, 200 meters wide Y-shaped water channels will be constructed. However, the green group Greenpeace is not convinced.
There is no such thing as an eco or green reclamation. The ecosystem underwater are extremely sensitive to the change of the surrounding waters, like corals or dolphins. They are very sensitive when the oxygen level or temperature, acidity, turbidity, or nutrient changes.
Chen added that even after the islands are built, the change in water velocity or direction would affect the ecosystem in the area. The overall project is scheduled to be completed in 20 years, but Greenpeace has found that projects of a similar scale are rarely finished on time. Janice Low, HKIBC.
Police have arrested a 6th person in connection with the murder of model Abby Choi, whose dismembered body was found in a Tai Po house last Friday. He's a 41-year-old man who was detained in Sheung this afternoon. He's alleged to have tried to help another suspect flee the city in return for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Superintendent Alan Chong, meanwhile, said a search for some of Choi's missing remains has been called off. Officers spent the last 3 days combing the landfill site in Ta Kwu Ling, but did not find anything. The city's first mass rally since the mask mandate was lifted is expected to take place on Sunday. The Hong Kong Women Workers Association has obtained a letter of no objection from police to hold the event. It's scheduled to start at Southorn Playground in Wan Chai at 11 a.m. and end at government headquarters in Admiralty. The association is urging the public to speak out for women's rights ahead of International Women's Day. A surveyor has praised the government for being more realistic in awarding tenders instead of simply rejecting low-price bids. This comes after the city sealed its first successful commercial land sale this year at a price that was well below estimates. Joanna Ho reports.
A Mongkok site of more than 11,500 square meters has been awarded to the city's biggest developer, Sun Hung Kai Properties, which beat 2 rivals. The deal was sealed at about $4.7 billion, 16% cheaper than the lower end of the market estimate of around $5.6 billion. What is more surprising is that the price was 80% lower than the highest estimate of $22.8 billion when the plot was first offered in the land sales program last year. Colliers Asia executive Dorothy Chow believes that developers are taking a prudent approach and considering several factors, including the market outlook and interest rates. She said the government must accept low-priced bids if it is keen to put sites on the market. Chow said the government has become more realistic compared to the past when it rejected tenders when the bids were too low.
I think they are more receptive to the current situation, and due to the last tender bids that they have received for all those large commercial sites in the last few months, they have got better understanding of the market situation.
Sun Hung Kai plans to construct a 320-meter tall commercial building with a gross floor area of 1.5 million square feet on the site at the junction of Sai Street and Argyle Street. The project is expected to be completed in 2030. The project includes a daycare center for the elderly and a community hall. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Overseas, the United States has denounced remarks by an extremist Israeli politician who called for the destruction of a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank.
I want to be very clear about this. These comments were irresponsible, they were repugnant, they were disgusting. We condemn these provocative remarks that also amount to incitement to violence. We call on Prime Minister Netanyahu and other senior Israeli officials to publicly and clearly reject and disavow these comments.
Hardline Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said the state of Israel should wipe out Havana. His comments came days after Jewish settlers went on a rampage in the village, burning Palestinian homes and vehicles. One Palestinian was killed and about 400 villagers were injured. The attack followed the killing of 2 Israelis by a man from Havana. Protests have continued across Israel against proposed legal changes, which critics say will reduce the influence of the courts and give the government more power.
They want to act against the justice as well as I would say the courts as well, not only because they want to save Bibi, they want something more than that. They want to make an annexation. We are not willing to give up to any future policies against liberalism as well as against minorities.
Outside the Prime Minister's home in Jerusalem, the protests turned violent as demonstrators clashed with police. Officers in Tel Aviv, meanwhile, had to rescue Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, from a salon. Protesters besieged the shop and mocked her for having a haircut amid the rising tensions. A 2-year investigation by 7 U.S. intelligence agencies has concluded that no hostile country was responsible for the mystery ailment that afflicted hundreds of American diplomats. It was called the Havana syndrome after being first detected in the U.S. embassy in the Cuban capital 9 years ago. U.S. diplomats complained of nausea, migraines, and memory lapses. In all, there were 1,500 cases in several countries. Sanctions were imposed against Cuba, which was accused of directing powerful energy beams at the building. Cuba said its economy suffered because of the U.S. claims, which have proved to be unfounded. Retail sales in Hong Kong have risen for the 2nd straight month, with their biggest increase since April last year. But a trade group believes that there is still a long way to go before sales are back at levels before the COVID crisis. Retail sales climbed for the 2nd month as COVID measures were relaxed. Sales in January rose 7% from a year ago to $36.2 billion. The figure was better than expected and was the largest jump since April last year. Several sectors recorded double-digit growth as consumer sentiment improved. Sales of jewelry, watches and clocks, and valuable gifts surged 23%. Clothing and footwear jumped to 14.7%, while electronic goods rose 13.4%. The figures may have been affected by the Lunar New Year, which fell in January this year, whereas in 2022 it was in February. The government expects the retail sector to be boosted further with the return to normality after more than 3 years of COVID measures. But Annie Dare, chairwoman of the Hong Kong Retail Management Association, said while the full reopening of the mainland border benefited overall consumer sentiment, retail performances improved only moderately. She estimates that it would take at least 9 months for retail sales to return to pre-pandemic levels. Hong Kong stocks have retreated a day after recording their biggest single-session gain in 3 months. The Hang Seng Index lost almost 1% on growing China-US tensions and concerns of rising American interest rates. Tech giants backtracked after soaring yesterday. Alibaba dropped 4.7%, and JD.com was down 2.3%. Mainland electric car maker NIO plunged 13.2% after its fourth quarter earnings fell below expectations. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down 190 points. Top 10 active stocks. Tencent lost $6. Tracker Fund lost 16 cents. Meituan lost $1.50, and JD.com lost $4.20. Forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar. Euro at 8.33, British pound at 9.40, and the Australian dollar at 5.29. The London FTSE is currently down 6 points. The works of a famous Spanish abstract artist go on show in Hong Kong from tomorrow. Some of the items on display left their home in Barcelona for the first time. Maisie Mock reports.
The Hong Kong Museum of Arts in Tsim Sha Tsui is showcasing the works of a renowned Spanish abstract artist. Titled Joan Miro, The Poetry of Everyday Life, the exhibition presents 94 items, including paintings and sculptures. 11 items left Barcelona, where they were stored for the first time. The exhibits show how Miro, who died in 1983, turned everyday objects into arts and broke the boundaries of painting and poetry.
Humble, ordinary, everyday objects were extremely important to Miro because of the connection that they represented with everyday life, with the lives of ordinary people. And the concept of poetry was extremely important to him. He saw no difference between painting and poetry. A painting had to be poetic, and poetry had to stimulate creativity and imagination.
For this piece titled Woman and Bird, Miro made bronze versions of everyday objects such as stools. He then pieced them together to make a sculpture of a woman with a bird on her head. As you walk through different sections of the exhibition, make sure to pay attention to the music playing in the background. They are all Joan Miro's favorite tunes and correspond to the art pieces, such as Mozart at this section for folk art. The exhibition opens tomorrow and runs until June the 28th, with tickets costing $15 to $30. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
On to the weather now. Mainly fine and dry tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 17 and 22 degrees. Conditions will remain the same during the weekend. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Thanks for watching. Good night.